Dak did have his best game of the season this past week. 22 for 27, 221 passing yards, one big-time throw, 0 turnover-worthy plays here for the Dallas Cowboys this past weekend. They win against the New York Giants. It's not a great opponent. I understand that, but a win is a win is a win, as they say. He has not gotten off to the best start. Now, you could sort of understand maybe a little slow start to the season because 64.5 passing grade so far this year, but his highest, an 83.4 passing grade this past week on Thursday Night Football against the New York Giants. Seth, was that more of like, hey, you're just going up against a Giants team that's not really playing well at this point in time? Or is this sort of like a bigger issue with Dak? Like, do we have problems that we need to think about? Because he was playing at an MVP level last year for the Cowboys, and we haven't seen him really hit that. Again, we saw him maybe a little bit this past weekend, but I'm wondering if that was just more the Giants than Dak really bouncing back to his 2023 form. What are you seeing when you're watching the Cowboys offense here with Dak?
Well, I think the first thing we have to put to bed, and probably shouldn't even have to do this, but like Dak is a really good quarterback. Like there's no doubt. I think that was put to bed last year with all the MVP numbers that he was putting up, especially in the second half of the season. He's really good. He deserves to get that much money to be one of the highest paid quarterbacks. But what's happening now is, especially as he's gotten older and he's had some injuries to his legs, he's not the runner that he used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so when things change in the offense and get worse around him, there's like a multiplier effect. So you're playing with tackles that aren't very good right now. I know they just signed Terrence Steele to a big extension, but you have a rookie playing left tackle. You have Terrence Steele playing right tackle. It's not good. Your secondary receiving options outside of CeeDee Lamb are not good.
Right.
CeeDee Lamb this year has not been – he'll figure it out, I guarantee you. But besides like one or two plays a game, like you're not seeing the separation from CeeDee Lamb. Just not being able to separate like at the break point that we normally associate with a guy who has that type of wiggle and body control and stuff like that. So if all those things are just slightly worse, it's going to have a much bigger effect on this offense as a whole and on this passing game. And that's really what we're seeing. Like Dak is always going to be a good quarterback. It's just they're not getting anything into Brandon Cooks. They're not getting anything into Jalen Tolbert. You had Jake Ferguson was injured. And I also think one of their issues is, they want to play with one tight end on the field, 3 receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back. The issue is when you do that, you get into a situation where your second best pass catcher is your tight end, but he's also the only tight end in the field. So he has to do tight end stuff while also being the number 2 pass catcher. And Jake Ferguson's a really good player. But if you look at teams like the Chiefs, for example, Noah Gray plays a lot of snaps for the Kansas City Chiefs because they don't want Kelsey as the only tight end on the field.
Sure, right.
And especially now, going forward with Kelsey, he is basically their number 1 option with Rice out. So like they're going to see obviously a lot more of even more Noah Gray, maybe even 3 tight ends on the field for the Chiefs. But we saw that last year with the Cowboys, and it really allowed them to kind of free up Ferguson. They're not doing that anymore. They traded, I forgot his name, but they traded one of the tight ends to Kansas City. Schoonmaker has not been able to get on the field. I think it was Hendershot. They traded Hendershot. Schoonmaker has not been able to get on the field. So it's like, well, like these are some of the issues. Can't run the ball either. Like that's
right. That's obviously really bad for them. Like there's no relief. It feels like it is just the CeeDee Lamb show. And I'm even watching this past week against the Giants, and a lot of Dak's best plays. I mean, and I'm not like saying this just to like pump Dak up, but like it's elite timing and placement throws. I mean, like it's in-breaking stuff where these wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb included, I watched this with CeeDee Lamb receptions. He's covered. Like he's completely covered with press coverage or at least close coverage, maybe not exactly on the line of scrimmage, but they're waiting for the in-breaking route. They're able to time it well. Dak has just such great timing and placement with the ball being a little bit lower and getting there exactly when it needs to, that a couple of those passes were completed for first down specifically. And I'm like, man, that just looks more difficult than it should be on a consistent basis. And that is what it feels like. So, you've watched more Dak than I have just this season, but with his struggles, do you just think that it's an extension of the fact that the Cowboys are not good enough in the run game? There's no relief there. There's no extra tight ends that they can really rely on. Brandon Cooks, like you said, is not giving them what they need as a wide receiver too, especially for an offense that wants to be as potent as the Cowboys can be. Is that simply what it is? Do you think it's less of a Dak problem, some of these lower passing grades, and more of just an overall, the Cowboys offense is not structured to succeed the way that it was last year, or the way that we were maybe predicting it could have been this year?
I would put it more on the offense than Dak. I'm not saying Dak's been perfect. His accuracy numbers are the worst of his career so far. And honestly, they're like bottom 5. I do think a lot of that is tight window throws, right? Like, it's tough to be consistently accurate when you got to make the perfect throw every single time.
Right.
And that's what they're getting in this offense, is just having to make the perfect throw every single time. And the run game is no run game. They're going to be down in games a lot because the defense, I don't know what we're going to get out of this defense going forward. If we're missing DeMarcus Lawrence, we're getting a Micah Parsons on a bad ankle. Mm-hmm. And I would say teams have been able to mitigate some of that pass rush already this season. You saw it with the Saints, you saw it with the Ravens, even a little bit with the Giants offensive line and offense that has struggled for 3 seasons with this Cowboys defensive line. And they were able to do some stuff that, again, mitigated these awesome pass rushers on the outside. And you know what? I want to talk about the defense a little bit, because this might be more of the downfall of the Cowboys this season. They can't cover anybody, man. It is rough. And I think so much of they're missing Deron Bland.
Right. Right.
Hopefully he comes back and he's a difference maker like he was last year. But their coverage unit was boosted by the pass rush. I mean, that's not saying anything that no one knows about football.
And the takeaways, right? I mean, like, that's been the thing with the Cowboys over the last 3 years, is pass rush and crazy amount of takeaways.
Well, how do you get crazy amount of takeaways? You know that ball is coming out hot because that quarterback doesn't want to stand in the pocket. You can undercut balls and you can make a lot of plays. And like, Trevon Diggs is a fine corner, but he's not the 11 interception corner we might have thought he was. Like, he gives up a lot of separation, and a lot of them, and like, they played with Andrew Booth last Thursday. Like, that's not a winning business model. Carson was injured. Bland, like I said, Bland is injured. So like, they need someone there. They can't stop the run. Like, Mozzie Smith had his best game as a pro. And if you're getting that type of Mozzie Smith going forward, then we're good. But that's just one game out of 18 that he's played in his career that haven't been really good. So I get really worried about the Cowboys. And I say that as someone who maybe bet the Cowboys to win the division, and now I'm very nervous about it. So like, because I thought Dak is too good, CeeDee Lamb is too good. They'll figure out all the other issues. And that just hasn't happened. And you're getting a little nervous. Now, luckily, the Philadelphia Eagles also have their share of issues. But yeah, maybe it's the Washington Commanders division.
I'm not saying this to like pat myself on the back, because it's 4 games and a lot can happen throughout the NFL season. But I thought the Cowboys were in for a big regression this year. Even with an experienced guy like Mike Zimmer coming in, like, I just don't think people gave Dan Quinn the credit he deserved for that defense being as good as it's been over the last couple of years. And with his departure, especially to a team in the division, I thought the Commanders were going to be a little bit better. And I thought this was a year where Dallas is going to miss out on the playoffs. But it is worse than I thought it was going to be. Like, I still thought that this team could potentially win double digits, somewhere a little bit above 500. And they're struggling right now. There's no doubt about it. And Dak, basically has to be superhuman for this team in its current state to be able to win football games, and he hasn't even been that. And it's hard to be too hard on him for it, because you go, hey, why aren't you the MVP that you were last year? And it's like, well, it's kind of tough for that to be the expectation, right? So we will see. We will see if something gets better. Obviously, like, the cavalry's not coming in the run game. Maybe the offensive line can get better as the season goes on, because they haven't played very well so far, but I don't think Brandon Cooks is turning into, an elite receiver in the second half of the season. Jalen Tolbert, I feel like, is sort of just he's sort of like a deep threat receiver who they're asking to be a lot more at this point, and the ROI, the early ROIs are low for them. So we will see what happens, and I think that this is a big matchup that they have coming up, obviously, with the Steelers, because if you drop this one and, if the Steelers offense can look more explosive than they have been in the past, then you really got to sit here. And if the defensive line cannot get pressure on this beat up Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line, now all of a sudden you're talking about a situation where you're going to have to panic a little bit. As much as you can or should, maybe 5 weeks into the season for the Dallas Cowboys. So